So today we're talking about expanding our emotional intelligence. And the first thing I want to do is just define intelligence. When we think about what intelligence is, intel, why do we gather intel, information, right? When we expand intelligence, we expand our ability to gather information. We expand our ability to gain information from the world around us, from the world within. So emotional intelligence is how we actually glean information from our emotions. And this is really important to be clear about because emotions have often been treated like something to be ignored, something to be controlled, something that we don't want to admit to. You know, there's sort of this idea that we must be stoic, we must be emotionless, that somehow being without emotion makes us reasonable or rational, right? That we cannot be rational and emotional. You know, I was watching, there's a TV show here in Canada called Murdoch Mysteries. And it's very exciting because it's based in Toronto back in the 1800s. But, you know, not a lot of shows are in Canada, so we get all excited if it's in Canada, let alone Toronto, where I grew up. So it's really interesting. There was, I'm binge watching it on Netflix right now, if I'm honest with you. And it was really interesting because they deal with issues in very interesting ways. It gives us insight into where we've come from. And the show I was watching last night was all about this woman who was posing as a man because she wanted to be an accountant, and women couldn't be accountants. So she was actually posing as a man. And so a lot of issues were sort of talked about amongst all the characters about the difficulty of being a woman in the 1800s. And it was really interesting because, of course, the men were acting in character for the time, saying, well, women are just so emotional. You can't even deal with them. They're just, you just never know which way they're going to go. So I thought it was interesting irony that tonight we're talking about emotional intelligence, or this morning, wherever we are. Because this is how we've seen the emotional body as something that just throws us off kilter, and we just don't know which way we're going to go, and the opposite of reason, the opposite of rational. And this is not correct. Emotions are a feedback mechanism for our soul in the world. If you imagine that this soul has a journey to take, for some reason, every single one of us on this call right now have a unique and interesting blueprint. We each have a unique purpose for being here. How do we know? How do we know which way we go? Right? If we just go sort of from the external system, what we've learned, what we read in books, what we learned from our parents, what we learned from the society we were raised in, for all intents and purposes, we would all live quite similar lives. Maybe we would choose different careers, maybe we'd marry different people, or we would choose to have children or not. But within those parameters, our lives would be very simple, or similar, right? What allows me to choose a different choice, a different path, you know? And this links directly into our intuition. We speak a lot about listening to our truth, honoring our path. But what is the mechanism that tells us we're on path? It isn't our rational mind. Our rational mind is brilliant at spreadsheets, pros and cons lists, figuring out the math, learning how to drive a car. Our brains are fantastic, right? but they cannot make a decision, right? I know a lot of you guys have heard this many years ago. My first teacher, he used to say that the smarter you are, the least able you are to make a decision. Because the smarter you are, the more sides of everything you see. And if you try to make a decision from that place, you will always end up in analysis paralysis. You will be stuck in the middle. And the more sides you see, the more confusing it will be. But of course, this is treating ourselves like a robot, like an automaton, that simply must look at all the information and choose the optimal route out, as if our life path can be created by a mathematical equation and we choose the right answer based on some formula, right? That's not what a human is. That's what a robot is, right? The human, the soul, knows that they're here to have an adventure. They are here to climb that mountain. They are here to experience something. So we have to listen to the soul. So what is the mechanism? Emotional response, right? And the biggest challenge with this, which puts us at a distance from being able to glean intelligence from our emotions, is because for millennia we've buried our emotions. So we don't often have a healthy relationship with them. We have a distant relationship. We don't understand them. You know, I was just talking to someone yesterday about how I think they had an issue with someone, like they had to, maybe they were splitting up with someone and they had to split property or something. I can't remember the story. I'm better at telling my own stories, not so good at other people's stories. And, but it was really interesting because they'd kind of lost connection, right? In the battle, right? They'd lost connection. And the question became, like, I wonder what they're thinking. Like, maybe they're thinking this, maybe they're thinking that, maybe they're thinking this. But of course, once there's a disconnect, we have no idea what they're thinking. We have no idea where they're coming from, how they're feeling, what their motivations are, anything. And in a lot of ways, this is like us and our emotions. Because we've put distance between them, we don't understand them. And so they kind of just run ragged or rampant. They just sort of go crazy, you know, unchecked. And then emotions can be scary, right? Because if we just let our emotions get the best of us, it's like living on a tempest. It's living in a horrible storm in the middle of an ocean, and we're just like thrown from pillar to post, you know, kind of thing. I remember years ago when I first used to go to this holistic health educator. The woman I talk about a lot in my class is my friend. We're friends now. And I remember going to her at one point, probably 20 years ago, and I was just exhausted. I had small kids. I had foster children. I was married. We had a farm. I was just busy beyond my measure and just exhausted. And I was standing there looking at her, and she looked at me. You know, that way like psychics do. They go, They kind of stare into your soul for a minute to get you figure out where you are, you know. And she stares at me and she said, you know, Katrina, you have a choice. You could live your life as if you're in a pinball machine and just go flying in one direction until you hit a wall and then bounce off again until you hit a wall. You could continue to live like this if you want. Or you could start listening. And that really hit me. Because I was feeling those walls. I was feeling that pain of requiring to be forced to change direction instead of sitting in the center and listening and saying, and what was the number one thing I wasn't listening to? My emotions. I prided myself on having a rational mind. I prided myself on being reasonable and intelligent. Emotions were for weak people. I don't even know if I consciously thought that. Probably not. I think it was just osmosis, what I picked up from the world. And also for me, as an adult, I went to university, studied mathematics, and I was a computer programmer in a time where women weren't in computers. Everywhere I worked, I was the only woman everywhere. And that also might have affected my requirement to stay stoic in that masculine, non-emotional state. Made me feel safe and, professional. So it's quite a journey to actually not just not oppress our emotions, but actually listen. And the first thing is to actually understand that our emotions are a direct response to the world around us, and they're there for guidance. They're 100% there to be listened to. Period. Right? So let's take an example. Let's take an example like anger. Right? So you're going through your life and you're just being you. You're just doing your thing. Everything's good. Someone approaches you and they do something. Maybe they say something or they do something, right? And your emotional response is anger. And think about what your body is actually doing, because we've really sublimated our bodily reactions, again, to be professional and, even in the spiritual community, right? We must be the Buddha. Nothing bothers me. I have no triggers, right? I am in, we don't want to be that person, right? To be there naturally, that you're actually just genuinely happy. That's awesome. But we don't want to get there by ignoring our reality, our truth, right? So someone pisses me off. What is my physical response? Hey, right? Hey. My arms go out, they get strong, and I push them away. That's anger. So what am I doing? What is this physical motion telling me about my surroundings? Unsafe. Something's wrong. Someone is stepping on your toes. Someone is crossing a boundary. This is not okay what just happened. This is important. Imagine what happens after millennia of ignoring that natural protective response. This is a healthy protective response. This is a very lovely, vulnerable cargo. Very valuable. This is important. Now, of course, one of the challenges with anger is it has some things that feel like anger or have been associated with anger. So we're afraid of anger and we judge our anger and we say, how can I get rid of my anger? What do you mean, how can you get rid of your anger? Why are you angry, right? Now again, anger about something in the past is very different. This is a mental construct, right? If we're angry about something that happened 5 days ago or 5 hours ago or 5 years ago or 30 years ago, that's something completely different. That's a created response. And that's something else. That's something we can look at that rationally. We can look at that and say, okay, there is something happened in the past. We created a mental structure, a story, with a pile of attached emotions to it. At this point, if we're looking back in time, we say, when this happened in the past, I felt anger because a boundary was crossed and it was not right. How can I make sure that that doesn't happen again? Do I have to adjust a philosophy? This is a rational process. To allow ourselves to dive in and feel that anger again may not be necessary. There could be a time that you've got trauma wrapped up in that and you need to scream and yell and hit pillows and, release the trauma. But for the most part, when we hold anger towards someone else from something in the past, it's still a message, but it's not the same as the emotional response in the moment that protects us. Because if it's from the past, we have to say, why am I so angry? What's going on? But we still pay attention. We don't get caught up in it. That's where we have to stay rational and say, is there a repeating pattern that I don't believe I can stop? Am I angry at myself for putting myself in a position where I am not allowed to make choice? Who am I really angry at? Because this is different, right? This is something that we can be rational about. Okay. Also, those tend to happen because we didn't honor the anger in the moment. For some reason, we talked ourselves out of it. And then now it's stayed within to be mentally processed until we figure it out so it doesn't happen again. Then we can let it go. So now let's come back to the moment. Something has happened and you're angry. You have to say something. We have to actually act. We have to go, whoa, stop. Oh, you're being too sensitive. Nope. No, visceral response here. Something's really wrong. Now, I didn't say anything. You can't prove it. There's nothing you can right? It's like, it doesn't matter. My entire body is a litmus strip and it's saying, back this person off. It's that intelligent, right? Our bodies know when something's amok. Honoring anger is such a big deal. The other thing that makes us afraid of anger, makes us not listen to anger, is rage and temper tantrums. Because oftentimes we associate anger with rage. Rage is not anger. Rage is someone who has lost their mind. This isn't anger. Anger is a protective mechanism. Rage is a control mechanism. Rage is if you're a child and you just can't get your way, that's not anger. That's, frustration that you didn't get your way. You've been thwarted and you didn't, and so you lay on the ground and you pound your fists and you freak out and you scream and yell. Temper tantrum. Whether you're 2 years old or you're 42 years old, temper tantrum. This is very different, not anger, right? And if you find yourself having temper tantrums, or if you're around people who are having temper tantrums, as an adult, it looks like rage. It just gives an adult version of it. But it's only there to control the other. The only reason a child has a temper tantrum is because they want what they want. And mom and dad aren't listening. So they're going to scream and yell. If there was nobody there, they wouldn't pound the floor. So if a full-grown adult is doing it, temper tantrum, right? And we can still treat them with the love that we would treat the child, but we don't change. We just still stay the course. And I only mention that. That's not really what this talk is about. I mention it to really be clear how to listen to our own true anger, which is super healthy. It's not rage. It's not a tantrum. It's nothing like that. It's not an old story. It's in this moment. This makes me angry. And you can say that. You can say, I don't know why, but I'm so angry right now. Let's really look at what's going on. I don't know whether a boundary has been crossed. I don't know. Something is amok. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's me. Maybe this smells like something from my past. But anger is rising and I have to honor it. We don't move on until we've sorted this one. And the more we do that, the more we just meet it as it comes, it doesn't fester and grow and add like mental stories and emotional stories and all this stuff to the point that you can't even sort out what the original issue was, right? Let's look at another emotion. Let's look at fear. So something happens. And again, we're talking about fear as a response to something that is actually happening. A huge amount of the fear that runs through our system isn't real. It is based on if statements. If this happened, oh my God, what if, and oh, it's not real, right? It's like watching a TV show and internalizing all the drama from the TV show and then walking around afraid of what you just watched on TV, right? To be really clear that the healthy emotions, emotional intelligence comes from what is actually happening right now in this moment. If I am filled with fear, sitting here all by myself in my apartment, that's something else. That's not fear. Maybe it's induced paranoia from someone else. Maybe it's not a healthy fear. And anything beyond what's happening right now is something created out of a mental construct. Okay? It's amazing. It's an amazing exercise to look at the fears within us and actually ask ourselves, is what I'm afraid of present in this moment in my life right now? Is there any evidence of it right now? Right? Because we live in a very strange world that's almost, kind of like the Matrix, right? The movie, where it's almost like our minds are wired into another system, and the system is saying, be afraid of being alone, be afraid of getting fat, be afraid of getting old, be afraid of losing your money, be afraid of and it's all coming in. But is any of it real in this moment? It's an important discernment. And this is, again, part of the intelligence. If there's a fear in me, for me to be able to sit in my quiet center and say, is this present in my life? Yes or no? No. Or yes. And if the answer is yes, then there will be something we can do to fix it. Fear, real fear, has purpose. Real fear is, there's a dog chasing me, baring its teeth, and I am going to kick into massive adrenal overload so that I can outrun that dog. Right? I am going to respond to the dog chasing me, and my body's going to fly. That's fear. Right? Worry is not fear. Worry is a complete mental construct. Right? It's that great Mark Twain quote, I've been through some terrible things in my life, and some of them actually happened. It's one of my favorites, right? So it's really important to be able to discern, what is there to be afraid of right now in this moment? Right? And if fear is a big one for you, if that's something because fear is very confusing. If we are flooded with fear, it is hard to sort things out. So to take even a piece of paper and say, okay, what am I afraid of? Name them. Name the fears, right? Name them. And then look at them and ask yourself, are these coming in from the matrix? Or are these present in my three-dimensional reality right now? It's just a very important discernment. And if they're real in your three-dimensional reality, then there will be something you can do to help alleviate the fear. All emotion, all real emotion is valuable, including fear. Because fear will tell you, let's say you're in a relationship that's abusive. You will have fear. And it's helpful. And it means if I'm afraid that my partner's going to come home and beat me, that's real, right? What's the action that my soul wants me to take? Get out. Don't stay there, right? Whether we choose to stay or we don't choose to stay is a choice. But the fear has purpose because the fear is trying to protect us from real imminent danger, right? It's very, very, very valuable to sublimate fear in the real world it means we're going to be hurt a lot, right? Because we're not listening. Very important to listen. How about sadness? Right? Sadness is a real emotion. So what happens to our bodies? Again, if we look at our physical response to these very real emotions, anger, push away. Fear, run. Escape the danger, right? That's fear. Get out, run, right? Sadness, our shoulders droop and we kind of come in like this and we protect our heart, right? We do this. This is sadness. What am I doing energetically? I'm protecting my vulnerable self. I'm contracting. I'm in a state of contraction. So what is that telling us? What is the intelligence that the sadness has for us? It's telling us that something is amok, right? There's something in our life that is causing us to contract. If you imagine the opposite of sadness is happy, right? So something happens and immediately your heart lifts and you go, oh, that's a great idea. Happy. Something happens and immediately your heart drops. Oh, sad. Right? What if your life is filled with things that constantly make your heart drop? Right? Maybe you're in a relationship that you just never are getting that happy. Maybe you're in a job that's sort of this perpetual thing. Maybe you have thoughts in your mind that keep pushing you down and down and down. What is the value of the sadness? What is the action that the emotion of sadness is telling us? Well, first of all, if someone's asked you a question, if someone says, hey, do you want to do this? And sadness is the answer, the drop is the answer, then the answer is no. Right? When in 1999 I was sick with breast lumps, and that's when I met my first teacher and had my first, I guess, maybe my first real series of conscious dark nights of the soul. And I never said no to anybody. I wanted to be Superwoman. I wanted everyone to be able to trust me, and not trust me, but depend on me. I wanted to be seen as strong and, I don't know, special. So if you ask me, oh, Katrina, can you do this? Sure. Do I want to? No. But I felt obligated to meet everyone's expectations. And at the time, of course, this is in 1999, so we had phones on the wall, It's so funny how things can change in 20 years. So we had phones on the wall. And my teacher actually said to put a sign above the phone that says, let me think about it, I'll call you back. Because I always just said yes. And for me, this teaching of yes or no in my heart was instrumental to learning what my truth was. Because my truth, I had completely created it in my mind. I had created, well, here's what I want to always say. Here's what I want to be perceived as. Here's how I want others to like me or not like me. Or here's how I'm going to achieve my goals in life. Whatever it is, right? So if someone asked me a question, it would go through this mental process and come up with a yes or no answer. Was it efficient? Was it right? Was it taking me one more step closer on my journey, on my course, on my goals, whatever? Oh, yes. Right? I didn't even check here. I didn't even check with my greatest litmus strip right here. Right? So having this sign said, what was your first response? Sure. Or was it, yes, I would love to do that? Happy, sad. This is one of the most valuable pieces of emotional intelligence. This is the most valuable mechanism within us to recognize our path. And the amazing thing about this yes-no is that we can't explain it to anyone, which is very challenging in our world because we're very legalist and we really like to be able to control others. That's really what it comes down to. So if someone else asks us if we want to do something, and obviously they want us to do it because maybe they're counting on it, and we say no, they want to convince us that the answer is yes. So well, why? Why? Tell me why. And if you tell me why, then I can argue with you until you change your mind. That's why people ask us. So it's kind of funny, right? Like when we start listening to this, when we start honoring our emotional intelligence, it might be really confusing to those around us, right? Because suddenly, something's happening and you're suddenly getting angry and you're like, hey, I'm really feeling angry right now. Oh, it's nothing. No, I'm definitely feeling angry. Weird. Right? We better talk about this. But nothing happened. Or someone says something and it makes you feel sad and you go, hey. And they're like, what? It's nothing. I'm just being sarcastic. I'm just fooling around. You're like, you better stop. Because I have a feeling this is creating distance between us. It's really making me feel this way. Oh, you're so sensitive. Perhaps. But I have a sense that it's wisdom as to where this relationship is going if we don't listen. Right? Imagine how different navigating our relationships are if we actually listened to our emotions. Our emotions don't make decisions, but they inform us of the truth. Right? They inform us of the path we're on. It's so valuable, right? Changes everything. It's funny, actually. That's actually how in an earlier talk, this is actually how my friends and I speak. Like my friends that are intuitive, we actually speak in feeling words. Like our feelings are much more advanced than our minds, because our feelings can experience something that our minds don't understand yet. So even other dimensions or other aspects of reality, our bodies will feel them long before our brain has figured out a system to understand it. So feelings are extremely valuable, right? I was reading about brainwaves this morning and the difference between gamma and beta and alpha and delta and all this kind of thing. And just something I was reading, I skimmed over and it said something about how anesthetic, when you're out under anesthetic, gamma brainwaves disappear. And it was really interesting because a couple years ago, a friend of mine, he had this really cool brain thing that he hooked me up to electrodes and measured my brain and got me to feel certain things and measured and kind of got me on the screen and all this. And one thing he noticed was that I had a lot of gamma brain activity. I didn't know anything about it at the time, right? But it just, is something stirring in the back of my mind. The other strange anomaly about me that I know you want to know is that for some reason, anesthetic doesn't work on me. And I don't know why, and I've learned that the hard way, which I'm not going to go into right now, but I've learned it the hard way many, many times. And I can't be put under. And anyway, so this morning I'm reading this, but I've never known why I can't do anesthetic. I've never known what my friend's brain graph meant. And then this morning it was talking about how when you're under anesthetic, gamma brainwaves disappear. So I'm talking to my intuitive friend today. We're having coffee, right? And I'm like, so do you think that there's some connection between the gamma brainwaves and the fact that I can't do anesthetic? And I started talking about it, and she said, doesn't feel right. I don't know, it's just not landing as truth. But that's what it is. Like you go into your body and you go, does that feel right? She's like, no, I think you're on the wrong track. Right? Awesome. That's really valuable. So it's just interesting how important this is. Like emotional intelligence isn't just, gee, I can handle my emotions. Once we really get a good relationship with our emotions, they now will propel us into much higher wisdom and much greater version of reality, right? It's very, very valuable. The next emotion I want to talk about, we don't normally think of it as an emotion, but I want to talk about confusion. Because sometimes confusion can feel like an emotion, and maybe it is an emotion. Because in our definition, it's a response to the outside world, right? So here I am in my version of reality, how I understand things. And maybe this happens or that happens, or I learn this bit of information. And it kind of goes against what I understand about the world, right? So I have what they call cognitive dissonance. My cognition, my brain understands one thing, and what's being told to me doesn't work. That doesn't fit anywhere. It's maybe even opposite. So sometimes it's a sign that what you're being told isn't true, right? Like if someone says, here's what it is, and you're like, that doesn't feel right, right? So confusion for me, if I don't have this emotional litmus strip, this feeling inside of me that says yes or no, I'm going to stay locked in this confusion, this mental dissonance, because I don't have more information, right? But instead, so we have the dissonance and we go, okay, something's amok, right? And then we stop and we sit in our meditative center and we say, okay, what about this? Does that feel right? Yes, no, not quite. Okay. And the cognitive dissonance, the confusion begins the journey of exploration, of trying to get a sense of what lines up as truth within us. And again, this is very, very important in developing our emotional intelligence. Because if we've spent our life ignoring our own emotions, denying our anger, denying our sadness, denying our confusion, or just and I'm not against medication, but just medicating them away in whatever way, whether it's distractions or it's drugs, alcohol, whatever, if that's how we've always dealt with it, we won't know what truth feels like inside, right? We've been taught to do this. It's not a judgment. We've been taught to ignore it by any means necessary, right? So it's really important that if we don't honor this and we don't really begin the journey to start listening to our emotions, we won't know what truth feels like inside. Then how do we handle confusion? How do we handle cognitive dissonance? We can't. We just stay in confusion and we get stuck in that pinball machine getting thrown from side to side, right? So valuable to really, really honor these things. So those are the big emotions that I see as being a primal response of our soul to the world around us. Now there are many emotions beyond that we consider emotions, but I want to classify them as emotions that require a mental construct to exist. So imagine here's the soul. Then we have to create a story or a construct. And once that is in place, this other emotion can control us. Because these other emotions don't really do any good. So for example, let's say an emotion like shame. There's no such real emotion, right? We do things, we don't do things. Shame requires a system of judgment, and it requires another person to shame you, to make you feel badly. So you need a whole system that says, I'm not worth it, I'm not worthy, I'm not okay, I screwed up, there is no answer, there's nowhere out. This is a mental construct. The shame itself, there's nothing to deal with. What we deal with is the mental construct that even allows it to begin with, because it isn't real. How we feel the shame, is that real? Sure. Does it affect us? Absolutely. Is it to be ignored? No. But healing it isn't by listening to it, right? Healing it is looking at the thought processes that have made it allowed to be there. Because once we come to, let's say you did something and you feel shame about it. Well, if we change our mental thought processes and say, you know what? We all just do what we can do at the time. We all are doing the best job we can in the moment. Period. Like this is genuine love, right? Love for self, love for other. That if we looked at anyone else here in the room and we said, hey, you did the best job you could. No, I could have done better. No, you did the best job you could in the moment with that current thought process, that current emotional state, you made the choice you needed to make. There's no such thing as shame, right? It's an imposed idea, right? It's not real. So again, we can honor the feeling, but the solution comes from going deeper and understanding where it comes from. What's the shame living on? Remove that, and it disappears. Guilt is similar, right? Guilt is a structure. Now, repentance is different, right? If I do something and I genuinely feel badly about it, like I mean genuinely, I never ever want to do that again. Something goes deep inside, shifts my consciousness so that never happens again, and I go on with my life. If I keep it in my consciousness, I have now created a story that I perpetually have this kind of bat that I can just keep hitting myself with. That's a mental construct. It is not a real emotion. Is it tormenting? Yes. Does it feel awful? Yes. The answer is to look at the mental construct. And so there's other emotions that I just want to, that are similar to that. Pride, righteousness, despair. All of these are built on a structure. You look at something like despair. Despair's structure takes sadness and says, I can't make a choice. I can't change my situation. You require a mental structure to say, I can't change my situation, right? Maybe I don't want to change it because, it's a trade-off or this or that. But the despair is because I believe I don't have choice. It's a function of that mental construct. One of the most important things about this, really discerning what emotional intelligence is understanding that if I am sad, imagine we change the wording and we say, instead of saying I am sad, I say I'm feeling sadness. Like that's very different. I am angry or I am feeling anger. When I say I'm feeling anger, it's like, whoa, what's going on? Right? I am not angry. I am me. I am this divine, eternal being manifest on the earth. And in this moment, I am experiencing anger. Right? It allows you to have your witness mind, that neutral space in the middle that says, what is going on here? Very different. And I don't mean to do it like Spock or something, like I'm not feeling it, right? We have to feel it because the feeling is important, because I'm speaking about it very academically. But imagine anger. Like imagine something's wrong, right? There's an emotional fire inside of me that creates the strength to hold my boundary, right? I have to feel it, because that is what will actually keep people away. If I'm actually frightened, if I feel it, that will drive my adrenaline and I will run for safety, right? If I am sad, if I feel the sadness deep enough, I will make change in my life. So the feeling is very, very, very important, right? But we can do both. We can still be aware of I am, and fully feel what's going on in my life. Like for me, I so value my emotions. I think it was last week or the week before. Oh, I was so angry. I was just furious. Furious about all kinds of things. But because I knew I was angry, because I was feeling anger, I let myself dive into it, right? You know, my daughter comes over to do jigsaw puzzles and she's like, how are you doing? Mad as hell. Like, I'm so mad. And she's like, really? And she's doing a jigsaw. What's going on? Well, there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this, right? And it's like, but I honor that anger. I want to know what's inside of it. I want to know what's underneath it. I value it. If I'm feeling sad, I'm going to honor that sadness. And I'm going to feel it. And if I'm with friends or we're having coffee or we're doing whatever, and they're like, how you doing? I am so sad these days. I just can't snap out of it. There isn't a soul in my circle that would ever say, well, what can we do to make it better? They're going to say, what's going on? Let's dive in. Right? Because this is a very important piece of truth. This could be a turning point. This could be a catalyst. This could be important wisdom that has to be uncovered, right? But it doesn't have to own us. Even on my saddest days, I still exist. I am still present. I can see myself sad. I can see myself angry, right? The last thing I'm going to mention, and then I'll look at your questions, is our emotions are a very interesting part of our intuitive process, right? If we really want to know where we're going in life, right? There's a couple of pieces there. If you imagine that human beings, we are magnetic creatures, right? We are literally attracted to and repulsed by things. And what's fascinating about emotions is they tell us what we're attracted to and what we're repulsed by. Not to get caught up in the word repulsive, because there's a lot of weirdness attached to that word. But literally, we are pushed away from some experiences and drawn towards others. Even see how my body's doing that. I'm going, ooh, attracted to. Ooh, repulsed by. These are emotional responses. One time, I went to a Tantra speed dating event, which is hilarious in concept. But they actually had some really interesting exercises there. And one of them was we were blindfolded and placed in front of someone. And we just had to sit cross-legged, blindfolded, and they couldn't speak. And all we had to do was feel whether our bodies leaned in or leaned away. Right? No sight, no sound, just leaning in and leaning away. It was so interesting, right? Now, I mean, we can imagine that romantically, but imagine it in life. That everything that comes across our plate, do we emotionally move towards it, or do we step back a little? This is incredibly important. This is deeply interwoven in our intuitive process, right? If I was to say to myself, should I do this? Is this on my path? One of the best things I can ask myself is, how do I feel if I do it? Ugh, frustrated. Ugh, afraid. Ugh, happy. Right? You know, it's more than a yes, no, right? It's juicier. It's more colorful. It's so valuable. Like, it's literally how we navigate our path here. Can I speak about breakups and grief and loss? Grief is hard. The hard thing about grief is that, you know, if we actually lose someone who's passed, it's almost like our souls have been intertwined, and when we lose them, we now have to learn to live without them, right? And so oftentimes, if we've lost someone, it takes a year at least, because it's like we have to go through the birthdays and the holidays and the weekends and the Sunday dinners and all that, whatever the things are that our lives were interwoven in love and joy and or sadness or whatever, but that we were interwoven. And that's a massive adjustment. Like, grief is not something to be taken lightly, and it's something to be honored for the time it takes to truly, I don't know, almost fill back in the pieces that that person filled in for us, right? Breakups can be like that. They're not quite as, sometimes breakups are more complicated because there's sometimes anger or resentment, or there's emotional ups and downs from the relationship. Like, I remember even when I left my husband after 20 years, and it was my choice to end the relationship, and it was very amicable, and we had a whole year that we lived together while we were separated, and a lot of time to work things out. When I finally moved out into my own apartment with my daughter, I emotionally crashed for 4 months. It was almost like my system exhaled after 20 years. Like, it just exhaled, and it's an important time. It's an important process to let go. So it's a toughie. Question. What do you think about anxiety? I think for me it is a sign that I'm not listening to my emotions. Like, it's a warning system, bells going off. What do you think? Again, anxiety is important. I did a talk this morning about anxiety. There's a link in our circle if you want to listen to it. The circle, Tantra, Love, and Connection with Katrina Boss. Anxiety is interesting because anxiety is almost, it can be many, many things, but for example, a simplified version would be that anxiety is almost a systematic trauma response that's sort of wired into our nervous system, right? Anxiety seldom happens because something is actually dangerous right now. It's just that whatever is happening is like a previous thing. Like, it's making us act, like react, right? Act again. Do something that we did in the past, and it's stored in our breath pattern. It's stored in our psyche, and we're repeating it. And so anxiety isn't really an emotion in the moment. It's more like a ghost that keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. But that's an incredible oversimplification of anxiety. And definitely check out the talk that I did this morning, because we talked a lot about PTSD and emotions, and being a highly sensitive person and being an empath and all that. How do you find joy when you don't feel it? Joy. If you don't feel it, it's because it's not there. Emotions aren't something that we create. It's not something that we choose. Like, let's say I'm living in a very difficult situation, then that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling trapped. That's what I'm feeling. Joy is a response to something actually that's joyful, right? And for me, in my life, because I know you want to know, whenever I'm ever unhappy, whenever I find myself kind of despairing or, I used to have a friend and she'd say, "You're obviously not having enough fun in life." Like if I really start questioning the meaning of life or why am I even here? It's like, what are you doing in your life that you love to do? And it's so funny because as soon as I live in my life and I just say, you know what? I'm going to dance every day. You know what? I'm going to go for a walk every day. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to make sure I have a hot bath. I'm going to make love. I'm going to do something that brings me that I love to do. Then the natural emotional response is joy. Like it's really important. And like let's say we're in a difficult time, right? Maybe we're caring for aging parents, or we're in a time that's difficult, or maybe, we've got small children and we haven't slept in 2 years and we're like, I want to feel joy. Then it's really important to cultivate something in your life that makes you feel joyful. Like we don't want to just feel an emotion that's not connected to reality, right? Like it's not a created thing. The answer is an action. If there's a lack of joy, then dance for 5 minutes every day, right? Then make sure you go out and lie in the sun for 10 minutes every day. Do something that you love to do, and we will feel joy. How do you do the thing you want to do every day when your loved ones want your attention a lot? It's really, really important for us to know that we are an individual soul. 51 years ago, I was born. Breath came into my soul, and I was created, or this incarnation of me was created. At some point, perhaps I will pass on. I'm not sure I will, actually. Tomorrow I'm doing a talk on timelessness and immortality because I genuinely believe this is our reality. But let's say one day that breath will leave me and I will continue on. The point of this soul existing is to have this soul's experiences. And I've lived in service to others. I've lived in service to a husband and children and in-laws and family and my family and sisters and friends. And if you believe that you are here to be of service to others, then your days will be completely filled with the needs of others. Right? And again, it's just a choice. And at some point, if you say, I am a soul all on my own, and there are things that this soul is here to experience. So we have an and statement in life. I am going to experience something for my soul. And I'm going to play with the kids. And I'm going to make love with my partner. And I'm going to sell cookies at the bake sale. And I'm going to have a hot bath at the end of the day. Right? It's not an either or, but it's just really important that you become part of the equation. But if you find yourself in that place where you don't believe you can choose joy because other people's needs are so important, I do recommend my book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer? It's my journey from 1999, that time that I was telling you about, when that was me. I really do have a servant's heart, and that can turn into a life of complete service to everyone else. And it's my journey from my head, who hold those ideas that that's what my purpose is, to my heart, where I really began to listen to something greater. So I do recommend that. I feel so tired to feel joy sometimes. Oh, it's so true. How can I laugh more? I don't laugh anymore. There are some very funny people in our circle, I'll tell you. Some days our talks go crazy and we diverge into complete laughter. But fatigue is very important. And that is something to really be, again, to really pay attention to. And ask ourselves, why am I so tired? Right? Why am I not sleeping? Why is sleep not a priority in our lives? You know, I remember when my son was born, he colicked and he cried for 11 months, and I didn't sleep for 11 months. I wasn't even human at the end of that. Like, I shouldn't have even been driving. I would drive my car, and I would go like 50 kilometers an hour, which is really slow for anyone who doesn't use kilometers. But I couldn't drive any faster. I had no response time inside of me left. I was so completely exhausted. It takes a long time to top up our tank, or to fill it right from the bottom. But it is one of the most valuable things we can ever do. And this is just a picture this is my book, Tantric Intimacy. Some of you guys have read it. But in the Yin Yang Balance within, Yang, or the masculine, is what we do. And the feminine, the yin, is the reserve. Well, it's many things, but in this case, it's the activity of the masculine or the yang, and the reserve and the quiet and the stillness of the yin, of the feminine. And the challenge is, so we want to look like that, right? We want to be perfectly balanced. This is what we need to move towards. But what happens in our very busy life, most societies really prize being busy and doing, right? So what happens is we end up looking like that, right? We have the white is the masculine, the yang, and the black is the yin, the feminine. This is totally unbalanced. So now look at how much black there is. So what happens to come back to balance? We get smaller, right? We contract. We cannot maintain that imbalance. The answer is to fill yin. The answer is to increase our reserve, and as our yin grows, as our foundation grows, we can then start to do things again. It's very counterintuitive to our society, but we need to honor it. It's a reality that we all know. We all know it's true. Just like a tired child. If a child is tired, they are out of control of their emotions, right? They can't connect with anything. It is so, so important to honor that, have rest, have quiet within, or else we can't do any of this work. Can I speak to finding a life path? Definitely join our circle. There's a lot of talks on there where I've done a lot of talks about that. But the most beautiful thing within the context of this one is, again, imagine yourself Sometimes they describe a human as, let's say, like an amoeba. An amoeba moves towards what is life-giving and nourishing, and what is dangerous, it goes right? This is our emotions. If my intention that I set for myself is I want to follow my life path, and I ask myself, is this the next step? If my body goes, oh yes, right? And I don't mean my brain, not my brain, my emotions, me, my soul goes, oh, yes, then yes. If my body goes, oh, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't know, and I know that person wants me to do that, and that person wants me to do that, and oh, I don't know. You do know. The answer is no. Right? It's a huge deal to override that massive brain of ours and honor our soul's path. How do we activate more yang? I feel too much rest. I am not a busy person. Just be excited about things. Sometimes in life we forget what we love to do. I remember when I was sick, the story of What If You Could Skip the Cancer, this book. I remember my teacher, the guru that helped, he asked me, he says, well, what do you love to do? And I said, I don't know. I knew what my husband loved to do. I knew that what my kids loved to do. I knew what everyone else liked to do. But I had long lost touch with what I love to do. So it's a very interesting journey to sit and say, what do I love? What did I love to do as a child? Like what did I love? And I'll tell you, for me as a child, I loved reading. And today, in this moment right now, if I actually took a day and said, I'm just going to read today, that's like the greatest gift anyone could ever give to me. Like, I'm just going to read like all day and just drink tea and like maybe go for a walk, because I read while I walk. That's epic. It's maybe not what we've been taught is Hollywood exciting, but that's epic. And I can still feel my little 10-year-old self reading, right? And so yeah, if we find that, it's like right now on YouTube, I love to dance. There's like so many great teachers doing awesome like salsa classes and jive. Today I was actually practicing some jive steps. That's a joy for me. And it actually, that joy bleeds into my whole life, my whole day. It's like I could spend 20 minutes practicing some crazy drunken sailor jive step. I'm happy for hours. So thank you so much. Join the circle. You can visit my website if you're interested in other things. I hope you have a lovely day, a lovely evening, and we'll see you soon.